And so, for example, there's a classic experiment in physics called the young slit experiment, the double slit experiment, which you can do with particles. You can do with particles like electrons, and basically you have a beam of electrons firing along and a pair of little slits, and the electrons go through, and very fundamentally, because the electron's position is not defined, you can't say which slit it goes through. It goes through both. This is one particle going through two holes at the same time. Particles really aren't supposed to behave that way, or at least on the macroscopic scale of things we're used to dealing with. And that's why the concepts are so incredibly difficult to explain, because you have to accept that at some very fundamental level, that that's the way the universe works. One thing you might do if you were doing this double slit experiment with a particle going through is say, okay, so why don't I just set up some very clever little gizmo which will actually measure whether or not a particle goes through one slit or the other. And then I can actually say which slit the particle goes through. And the amazing thing is, whatever thing you set up to detect which slit the particle has actually gone through, you can detect it. But then suddenly all the quantum mechanical effects go away. That suddenly the particle, yes, you can detect it, and it only ever, when you actually make the measurement, it only ever goes through one slit. But suddenly all the quantum mechanical effects go away. And that's this thing of collapsing the wave function. When you make a measurement, you go from a probabilistic thing, well, either the particle's here or the particle's here, to saying, on this occasion, the particle is definitely here.
Doesn't that mean you just solve the puzzle? What other quantum mechanical effects have gone away?
So let's go back to this twin slit thing again. If you don't make that measurement of actually saying which slit did the electron go through, because the electron then goes through first, and because it's behaving like a wave, when it comes out the other side, the two waves interfere with one another. And so you actually see interference effects between the two waves. You see, basically you see fringes. If you have a tank of water and you just make ripples in it, and you'll see that the waves travel through each other, but as they're traveling through each other, they interfere, and in some places you get big waves, and in other places you get no waves at all. And you can do exactly the same thing with this double slit experiment. You can get the electrons to interfere with each other and produce these wave patterns that you see, as you see in tanks of water. But the amazing thing is that you can do it one electron at a time. So one electron can interfere with itself as long as you don't do this thing of collapsing the wave function. So if you leave it as a wave function, you can actually get one electron to interfere with itself. And so that really is fundamentally associated with the wave function, and that gives you a really sense that the wave function in some sense is the real particle. That's what's really going on.
The two-slit experiment is very simple, but we have no rational or objective understanding of why the light acts the way it does. But if we look at the two-slit experiment as a process over a period of time, with time being formed photon by photon within the reference frame of the experiment, it can make sense. Light waves will come in contact with the plate with the two slits, collapsing into new photons with a position in space and time. The light waves that do not come in contact with the plate will go through both slits. The waves will then form constructive and destructive interference over a period of time, and an interference pattern will build up on the screen, photon by photon. This interference pattern will continue as time unfolds, photon by photon, within the isolated reference frame of the experiment. Just as in Newtonian physics, only when an external force comes in contact with the light does the interference pattern collapse. When an observer tries to see which slit the photon went through by turning on an electronic detector, forming a new photon-electron coupling, the interference pattern collapses. This is because the photon-electron coupling represents a new moment in time, the moment of now, within the reference frame of the experiment. If the observer turns off the electronic detector, the interference pattern will reform over a period of time, photon by photon. In this theory, we have a universal interactive process. The same interference pattern can be seen when sunlight breaks through clouds, forming rays of sunlight. The universe is in a process of continuous creation, continuously coming into existence with each new photon oscillation. Because the photon is also the carrier of the electromagnetic force, electrical potential is the same potential we have with any future event within our own reference frame that we can interact with, turning the possible into the actual. In this theory, we only need 3 dimensions and 1 variable of time. The parallel universes of U. Everett and the multiple dimensions of string theory are just future possibilities and opportunities within individual reference frames in our one three-dimensional universe. What we see and feel as time is a continuous process of energy exchange that we see as an ever-changing world with an uncertain future unfolding photon by photon. But it is also a ratio of change. The greater the energy, the greater the time dilation, and the slower time will run. In such a theory, it would be energy, not mass, that would form gravity, with gravity being a secondary force to electromagnetism. This can be seen mathematically, with both gravity and electromagnetism sharing the inverse square law. This can be explained if we say that energy equals mass linked to the Lorentz contraction of space and time. The Lorentz contraction represents the time dilation of Einstein's theory of relativity, slowing up the rate that time flows as a universal process of energy exchange or continuous creation. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, rate and share. It will help the promotion of this theory.